The machine hummed, cold and unrelenting, as I lay perfectly still inside the MRI tube. My chest rose and fell in shallow breaths, but my eyes stayed glued on the reflection of the doctor's face in the glass. He froze. His expression shifted from routine concentration to pure alarm. His lips moved, barely audible. "What is this doing here?" And in that instant, my blood turned to ice. What he saw on that screen wasn't just medical, it was a secret I wasn't meant to uncover. A secret that changed everything. If you've ever felt dismissed, ignored, or told your pain was all in your head, then this story is for you. Hit that like button, subscribe, and buckle in, because what started as years of silent suffering turned into a discovery that shook my family to its core, and ended with a revenge they never saw coming. I used to tell myself it was just stress. That the pounding in my head, the kind that made the edges of my vision blur, was something I could power through. After all, everyone gets headaches, right? That's what I'd been told for years. But deep down, I knew this wasn't normal. Mine weren't just bad days. These were storms inside my skull, waves of pain that knocked me off my feet and left me gripping the edge of my desk just to stay upright. I can't count how many times I slipped into the office bathroom just to press my palms against my temples, breathing through the pain in silence, praying no one would notice. Co-workers whispered that I was lazy, unreliable. My boss made little comments about mental toughness when I'd leave early. And every time, my chest would tighten, shame mixing with the nausea and pain. But the worst part wasn't work. It was my own family. When I tried to explain what I was going through, they didn't just dismiss me, they mocked me. Again with the headaches. My father would scoff. "You're too dramatic," my mother would add, rolling her eyes. Even my younger brother chimed in, "Maybe if you weren't glued to your phone all day, your head wouldn't hurt." I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake them and ask, "Can't you see me suffering?" But I didn't. Instead, I swallowed it down, because fighting only made me look weaker in their eyes. The nights were the hardest. I'd lie in bed staring at the ceiling, tears slipping down my cheeks as the pain throbbed behind my eyes. Sometimes I'd scroll through online forums at 3 a.m., reading strangers describe migraines, brain tumors, rare disorders, anything that might explain what was happening to me. It was the only place I felt less alone. But as the years dragged on, the loneliness deepened. No one believed me. Not doctors. Not co-workers. Not even the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. I felt like I was trapped inside a body that was betraying me, screaming for help, while the world turned its back. I lost count of how many doctors I visited over the years. Each appointment felt like the same cruel performance. I'd sit on the stiff paper-covered table, describe my pain, the blinding flashes, the dizziness. And the doctor would glance at me for a moment, scribble something on a pad, and wave me off with the same tired advice. Try drinking more water. It's probably stress. Cut back on caffeine. Every time I walked out of those offices, a white bag of useless pills in my hand, my throat tightened with the same bitter taste, hopelessness. Once, I gathered the courage to ask for something more serious, an MRI, a scan, anything to prove what I was feeling was real. The doctor leaned back in his chair, folded his arms, and gave me the kind of look you give a child throwing a tantrum. "Your headaches are common. You're too young to worry about anything serious," he said flatly. Then he added, almost like a joke, "You'll live. Just relax." I nodded, because what else could I do? But inside, I felt something crack. The dismissal didn't stop with strangers in white coats. At home, it was worse. My mother's voice still echoes in my ears, "If you stopped acting like such a victim, maybe your head wouldn't hurt so much." My father was harsher. "Back in my day, we didn't have time to be fragile. Toughen up." Even friends started to distance themselves. Invitations stopped coming. I was the one with excuses, the one who was always cancelling last minute because another headache had hit. The loneliness became unbearable. After one particularly rough appointment, I remember sitting in my car in the clinic's parking lot, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white. I didn't even start the engine. I just sat there, sobbing into my hands, wondering if maybe I was crazy. Maybe the pain was in my head in more ways than one. That was the cruelest part of all, the gaslighting, the subtle erosion of my own certainty. Every dismissive glance, every mocking word chipped away at me until even I started to doubt myself. But the truth was waiting. And when it finally came, it was darker and more shocking than I ever could have imagined. The headaches didn't just stay the same, they grew worse. What used to be dull, pounding pressure turned into sharp, stabbing pain that made me see stars. Some days, it felt like someone was driving an ice pick straight through my skull. One afternoon at work, it finally happened. I was standing in the break room pouring coffee when my vision blurred, the walls tilted, and my knees buckled. The mug shattered on the tile as I collapsed, clutching my head. When I came to, my co-workers were hovering over me, panic written on their faces. That trip to the ER should have been the turning point, but it wasn't. The doctor barely looked up from his clipboard. Probably dehydration. Maybe low blood sugar. He suggested I rest and sent me home like I'd wasted his time. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab him by the shoulders and beg, please listen. Something is wrong. But what broke me wasn't the pain, it was the bureaucracy. When I finally pushed for an MRI, the insurance company pushed back. Endless phone calls, forms, denials, not medically necessary. They said I didn't meet the criteria, as if my suffering had to hit some invisible threshold before it mattered. I begged. I cried. At one point, I even threatened to hire a lawyer just to be taken seriously. That desperation was what finally moved the needle. Weeks later, the appointment was scheduled. In the nights leading up to it, I couldn't sleep. I'd lie awake in the dark, staring at the ceiling, whispering prayers I wasn't even sure I believed in anymore. Please. Just give me an answer. Any answer. Let me know I'm not crazy. I didn't know it then, but that scan would uncover far more than I ever could have prepared for. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and faint coffee, the kind of sterile air that makes your skin prickle. I remember clutching the clipboard with my paperwork so tightly my knuckles hurt. When the nurse finally called my name, my legs felt like they were made of cement. Inside the imaging room, the machine loomed large, white, and humming with a low, mechanical growl. The nurse gave me instructions, lie perfectly still, it'll take about 30 minutes, but my mind was already spiraling. I slid onto the hard table, the surface cold even through the thin gown. As the table moved into the narrow tunnel, the walls closed in. My heart hammered against my ribs. The clanging began, sharp, metallic sounds that echoed like gunshots in the confined space. I focused on breathing, on counting seconds, anything to stop my mind from imagining tumors or strokes. But then, something shifted. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught a reflection in the small glass window. The doctor's face. At first, neutral. Then, stiff. His brows furrowed, lips parted, and he leaned closer to the screen. His whole body froze. A nurse whispered something to him. He shook his head slightly, muttering words I couldn't fully hear. But I caught one phrase, muffled yet sharp enough to pierce through the machine's noise. What is this doing here? My blood ran cold. The machine continued its deafening rhythm, but all I could hear was the thunder of my own heartbeat. My palms were slick with sweat, fists trembling at my sides. I wanted to speak, to demand answers, but my throat locked. I lay there in silence, staring upward, knowing in that moment that whatever they saw wasn't good. When the machine finally powered down, the silence felt louder than the clanging had. I was slid back out, blinking under the fluorescent lights, every muscle tense. The doctor didn't meet my eyes right away. He conferred with the nurse in hushed tones, their voices low, clipped, urgent. Finally, he turned to me, his expression carefully neutral, too neutral. That's when I knew. We found something unusual, he said slowly, as if choosing each word mattered. It's not what we expected. My stomach knotted. Is it a tumor? I whispered, already bracing for the worst. He hesitated. No. It's an object. The word hit me like a slap. An object. He explained, small fragments of metal were lodged deep in my skull. Not shrapnel, not an accident. They were positioned in a way that suggested surgical placement. My head spun as he described it, each sentence more surreal than the last. I ransacked my memory. No car crash, no fall, no childhood surgery I could recall. Nothing that explained why I'd been walking around for decades with foreign metal embedded in my brain. Are you saying someone put this there? My voice cracked, trembling. The doctor's silence was answer enough. His eyes flickered with something, pity, maybe fear. Memories began to flicker in my own mind, unexplained migraines as a child, nights waking up screaming, my parents brushing it off as night terrors. The way they always told me not to overreact, not to ask so many questions. The room seemed to tilt beneath me. All the years of pain, the endless dismissal, the gaslighting, it wasn't in my head after all. It was in my skull. And deep down, A terrible suspicion began to take root. My family knew. I went home that night with the MRI images clutched in my hands like a weapon. My mind was racing, replaying every detail the doctor had given me. Metal fragments. Surgically placed. Not an accident. Not natural. Someone had done this. And there were only two people who could have allowed it, my parents. When I confronted them, the room turned colder than the hospital ever had. My father's face hardened the second I showed him the scans. My mother's eyes darted away, guilt flickering before she masked it with anger. "What is this?" I demanded, my voice trembling. "How long have you known?" They exchanged a look, one of those silent conversations that spoke volumes. My chest tightened. They did know. Finally, my mother snapped, her tone sharp and defensive, "It was for your own good." Those words cut deeper than the headaches ever had. For my own good. The truth spilled out in fragments. When I was a child, they'd been approached about a study. A relative had connections, promised them money, told them it was safe. Just a little procedure. They signed the papers. They let strangers put something inside my skull, and then spent years pretending my pain was imaginary. I stood there shaking, betrayal burning in my veins. You let them use me like some lab rat. My father didn't flinch. We needed the money. And you turned out fine. Fine. That word echoed in my head. Fine, after years of suffering. Fine, after being mocked, dismissed, gaslit until I doubted my own sanity. It wasn't just neglect. It was betrayal. And in that moment, my rage crystallized into something sharp, cold, and unstoppable. The betrayal ate at me for weeks, but grief slowly hardened into resolve. I gathered everything, the MRI scans, the doctor's report, even fragments of the old paperwork my parents had signed when I was a child. Every lie they told me, every time they dismissed my pain, I turned into fuel. With a lawyer's help, I filed a lawsuit. Not just against my parents, but against the shadowy study they had sold me into. It wasn't easy. My parents tried to intimidate me, begged me not to ruin the family name. My father hissed, "You'll regret this. You're destroying us." But the truth was, they destroyed me first. The courtroom became my battlefield. When the scans were projected on the screen, a hush fell over the room. The judge's eyes narrowed, the jury leaned forward. My parents shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their faces pale as the evidence mounted. For years, they had dismissed me as dramatic, weak, broken. But here, under the fluorescent lights of justice, their lies crumbled. The ruling came down, guilty of negligence, conspiracy, and medical malpractice. My parents were ordered to pay damages, stripped of credibility in front of the entire community. The study was exposed, its organizers facing criminal charges. I'll never forget the look on their faces, shock, humiliation, and the dawning realization that they could no longer silence me. As I walked out of that courtroom, the weight in my chest finally lifted. For the first time in years, my head felt light. The pain wasn't gone, not entirely, but the doubt, the gaslighting, the shame? All of it had been replaced by something stronger. Validation. Justice. Revenge. Looking back, the worst part wasn't the headaches, it was the years of being silenced. The years of being told I was dramatic, fragile, weak. The betrayal cut deeper than any pain because it came from the people who should have protected me. But the MRI gave me more than answers, it gave me the truth. And with the truth, I finally had power. Justice didn't erase the scars, but it gave me something even more valuable, freedom. Freedom from the lies, from the gaslighting, from the cage my parents tried to lock me in. And in the end, revenge wasn't about money or punishment, it was about reclaiming my voice. About proving that no one, not even family, has the right to decide your pain doesn't matter. Sometimes, the sweetest justice is simply being heard and believed. If this story gave you chills, don't forget to hit that like button, it really helps more people find stories like this. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had someone dismiss your pain, only for the truth to finally come out? I'd love to hear your experiences. And of course, make sure you subscribe for more stories where karma comes full circle and justice is finally served. Because at the end of the day, the truth always has a way of rising to the surface, and when it does, it changes everything.